Well, hey there, friendships. Welcome back if you are one of my returning friendships. And if this is your very first time here, welcome to Curtis's Corner. You've either stumbled across this channel because you love movies, or YouTube looked at your watch history and thought, you know what this person needs? One more opinion. Either way, I'm glad that you're here. Now, before we get into today's review, if you end up enjoying hanging out with me, do me a huge favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss another movie review, ranking, or whatever cinematic rabbit hole I decide to throw myself down next. While you're at it, you can also follow me on all of my social media. Check out my podcast, Socially Unwell, where Billy and I somehow take the simplest topics imaginable and turn them into complete and utter chaos. And if you'd like to help support everything I do here on the channel, my Patreon is linked down in the description below. Every bit of support genuinely helps me continue making bigger, better content, and also justifies the frankly unhealthy amount of money I spend sitting in movie theaters. It's basically an investment. That's what I keep telling myself anyways. Now, Spider-Man. A character that's been rebooted, reinvented, thrown across the multiverse, emotionally traumatized approximately every 15 minutes, and somehow still can't catch a break. After No Way Home, Marvel had a pretty impossible task in front of them. How do you follow one of the biggest Spider-Man movies ever made? More importantly, how do you make Peter Parker feel fresh again without making him feel like a completely different person? Well, let's talk about Spider-Man: Brand New Day. So explain this to me. How many times are we going to completely reinvent Peter Parker before we all collectively admit that this poor guy is simply not allowed to have a peaceful existence? Seriously, every time his life starts looking even remotely stable, somebody at Marvel goes, you know what? What if we made it worse? And somehow, Spider-Man: Brand New Day takes that exact idea and turns it into one of the freshest Spider-Man stories we've had in years. Let's start with the obvious, because Marvel absolutely nailed this one. This version of Peter Parker is fantastic. One of the biggest concerns going into Brand New Day was whether Peter was going to feel like a completely different character after everything that happened in No Way Home. Thankfully, that could not be further from the truth. He's familiar enough that you instantly recognize this as the same Peter we've been following for the last 3 films, but he's also noticeably different in all the right ways. You can see the weight of everything he's been through. He's quieter, more reserved, more mature. There's a heaviness to him now that wasn't there before, and Tom Holland sells every second of it. He has that very specific look of someone who's been emotionally, mentally, and financially mugged by life. Like, this man doesn't just look exhausted, he looks like his rent went up, his therapist canceled on him, and his landlord texted, "Can we talk?" And somehow the city is still expecting him to stop a supervillain before lunch. Now, despite all of that, he still feels like Peter Parker. That is what impressed me the most. The movie never tries to reinvent him just for the sake of saying, hey look, he's darker now. It simply lets the experiences from the previous films naturally shape who he is, and honestly, I thought that that was one of the smartest creative decisions that they could have made. Now, while we're talking about Peter, can we please talk about that suit? Because somewhere along the way, superhero movies collectively decided that every costume had to look like it was vacuum sealed directly onto the actor's body. Apparently, every superhero has access to military-grade compression wear and a tailor who works exclusively in liquid latex. This suit finally remembers that it's a suit. It's textured, it has weight, it folds, it wrinkles, it actually looks like fabric instead of somebody discovering the spandex texture pack in Unreal Engine and calling it a day. It's such a simple change, but it makes an enormous difference. The second light hits it, it still looks like something Peter Parker could have actually put on instead of something that was digitally painted onto Tom Holland 3 weeks after filming has already wrapped. It's funny how lowering the amount of CGI somehow made everything look more real. Who would have thought? And thankfully, that suit gets plenty of screen time because the web slinging in this movie is absolutely phenomenal. I genuinely think this is some of the best Spider-Man web swinging that we have ever seen put on film. Everything just feels so fluid. Every swing, every dive, every last second web grab has this incredible sense of speed and momentum behind it. There were multiple moments where I actually caught myself grinning like an idiot because it finally felt like Spider-Man was moving exactly the way Spider-Man should. And if you've spent any time playing the Insomniac games, you are going to notice the influence almost immediately. Not in a cheap, hey, remember this kind of way. In a Destin Daniel Cretton clearly understands why people fell in love with those games kind of way. The movement, the fight choreography, even some of the weapons used by certain villains all feel inspired by what Insomniac created. It's like Destin Daniel Cretton looked at one of the most beloved versions of Spider-Man ever made and said, maybe, just maybe, we should take notes instead of pretending it doesn't exist. What an unbelievably refreshing concept. And honestly, I'm really glad that he did. Which brings us to the Rogues Gallery. I kind of like the approach that they took here. Instead of immediately throwing Peter into another universe-ending, reality-shattering, the fate of existence hangs in the balance kind of story, they grounded it. We get Boomerang, Tarantula, street-level problems, street-level villains. And I think that was one of the smartest decisions Destin Daniel Cretton could have made. It actually reminded me a lot of what Matt Shakman did with the villains in Fantastic Four First Steps. Rather than trying to overwhelm you with bigger and bigger threats right out of the gate, they let the world breathe first. They let the characters exist in it. More importantly, it immediately tells us who Peter Parker is now. He's on his own. There's no Avengers popping in to lend a hand, no billionaires writing him a check, no magical wizard opening a portal because things got a little spicy. It's just Peter trying to keep New York from falling apart one deeply inconvenient Tuesday at a time. That is exactly where Spider-Man belongs. Now, speaking of Peter being on his own, let's talk about Ned and MJ because I actually really liked how they were handled in this film. They're still here, but the movie makes a conscious decision to dial their roles back. And honestly, I think that was the right call. After spending 3 movies with them being such a huge part of Peter's life, it would have been really easy to fall back into that same dynamic. But instead, Brand New Day lets Peter stand on his own 2 feet. MJ still has an important role to play, particularly because Peter constantly feels responsible for keeping her safe while everything around him is falling apart. Ned is also used just enough to remind you of the history that these characters share without pulling the focus away from Peter's journey. Now, what I really appreciated is that their reduced screen time never feels like they're being pushed aside. It feels intentional. It reinforces just how different Peter's life has become after the events of No Way Home, while also proving that you can absolutely tell a fantastic Spider-Man story without relying on the same high school dynamic that we've had for the last 3 films. This is Peter's story first and foremost, and the movie never loses sight of that. Though, to be fair, Peter isn't entirely alone, because apparently the Marvel Universe decided to randomly shove Frank Castle into his orbit. It's an interesting dynamic. They have a history together that's mentioned a few times, though never seen on screen. And you get to see a slightly lighter side to Frank, which is wild considering his default setting is deep, dark, brooding mystery. But the second action starts, his sequences never let up. He is still the exact same Punisher, down to his core. And then, of course, Bruce Banner and the Hulk show up. the Bruce Banner scenes make probably the most logical sense out of all of the MCU character drop-ins in this film. But the Hulk scene, that is where things get wild and weird in the best way possible. While he's technically not Grey Hulk, he's not quite Green Hulk either. There are literally 2 moments where he looks noticeably greener in one scene than the other. I don't know if continuity took a smoke break that day, but I will tell you this. Give the Hulk salt and pepper hair permanently because it works. And those action sequences, easily my second favorite battles in the film. Though speaking of characters showing up, because someone somewhere at Marvel went, you know what we need? Probably someone to remind everyone that this is still the MCU. So we get Yelena. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't dislike the scene. It actually got a couple of laughs out of me. And it does provide enough context to explain why she's there. I just don't know if it was quite as strong enough to really warrant her inclusion in the film. It felt more like a quick stop on the way to the next destination than part of an essential part of his story. That being said, during that exact scene, you also get an almost naked Peter Parker, and I would like to just take a brief moment to appreciate the amount of work that Tom Holland has clearly put in, because he has genuinely never looked better physique-wise. Now, Tom has said that he was actually disappointed because he felt that the dehydration method didn't pay off the way he wanted it to for that scene. Tom? I'm gonna need you to be so serious for a second here. Bitch, it worked. Whatever you think didn't happen, happened. You looked great. Incredible even. I'm just saying. Now, enough about Tom Holland making the rest of us feel like we should probably be drinking some water and reevaluate our life choices. Let's actually talk about the action. My absolute favorite battle sequence in the entire movie is Spider-Man going up against the Hand. I love that this wasn't just another big CGI punch fest where everyone's flying through buildings, because apparently that's the only way to raise the stakes anymore. There are genuine moments where it feels like Peter could completely turn the tide, and other moments where you genuinely think he's about to get absolutely dismantled. But what really makes the sequence work is that it isn't just about the fighting. It's about Peter finally understanding his powers, coming to terms with who and what he is, and fully embracing it. The action becomes part of his character development instead of just something cool to watch. And because of that, it gives us some of the best fight choreography that we've seen in a Spider-Man film since Tobey taking on Doc Ock or Andrew facing off against the Lizard. And speaking of what he is, let's talk about that organic webbing. Now, this wasn't exactly a surprise considering it's been plastered all over the trailers, but I was really curious to see how they were actually going to handle it. Honestly, I thought they did a fantastic job. What makes it work is Peter's reaction to it all. He's fascinated because, well, he's a scientist. His first instinct is to figure out what's happening, but at the exact same time, he's terrified that something is fundamentally changing inside of him, and he's honestly kind of disgusted by it. Tom Holland does a great job selling every stage of that emotional roller coaster. You can see him trying to rationalize it, trying to understand it, trying to fix it, and eventually realizing maybe this isn't something that needs fixing. That acceptance is what really landed for me. It doesn't happen overnight, and it never feels forced. It feels like Peter slowly coming to terms with another part of who he is. On top of all of that, it's a really nice nod to previous iterations of Spider-Man and different eras of the comics without ever feeling like the movie is just dangling nostalgia in front of your face going, hey, remember this? It respects Spider-Man's history while making it feel unique to Tom Holland's version of the character. And then there's Sadie Sink's character. Who is she? Well, I'm absolutely not telling you because you deserve to experience that reveal for yourself. Now, there have been about 1 million fan theories floating around ever since she was cast, and I definitely went into this movie fully expecting her to be one very specific character. Whether I was right, whether I was wrong, whether I loved it, whether I hated it, I am legally keeping my mouth shut. What I will say is that it's a really fascinating take on a character rooted in Marvel lore, and I actually appreciate the direction that they decided to take with her. Whether it ultimately pays off is going to depend entirely on where Marvel takes it from here. But as of right now, they've definitely got my attention. That's probably the best compliment that I can give it. I'm genuinely excited to see where they go next. Now, does the movie have emotional beats? Absolutely. There are a couple of moments in here that I genuinely think are going to bring a tear to some people's eyes. The performances are strong. The writing gives those scenes room to breathe, and when the movie wants to slow down and let Peter simply be Peter, it really works. That being said, I do think some of the emotional impact took a bit of a hit. I don't think that's entirely the movie's fault though. The amount of pre-release hype surrounding this film, the constant rumors online, the endless speculation, the set photos, the trailers, the interviews, and even some of Marvel's own announcements, it all kind of chipped away at those moments before we ever even stepped into the theater. By the time certain scenes happened, I found myself thinking, yeah, I kind of figured that this was coming, instead of just letting myself experience the emotion naturally. That's not to say that the scenes don't work, because they absolutely do. I just think that they would have landed even harder if we'd all gone in with a little less information. And because of that, I still think No Way Home has the stronger emotional core. The highs in that movie just hit me harder, and I think a big part of that was because so much of it genuinely caught us off guard. Brand New Day definitely has heart, and it earns those emotional moments. I just don't think that they quite reach the same level as No Way Home. Now, even with the internet trying its absolute hardest to ruin every single surprise beforehand, like an impatient toddler tearing open Christmas presents in July, where do we actually land? Well, I'm giving Spider-Man Brand New Day an A+. This movie reminded me why I fell in love with Spider-Man in the first place. It understands that Spider-Man isn't just defined by the suit or the spectacle. He's defined by Peter Parker, a kid who constantly gets knocked down, questions everything, picks himself back up, and still chooses to do the right thing anyway. This movie never loses sight of that. On top of that, we've got some of the best web slinging we've ever seen put to film, action sequences that genuinely had me grinning from ear to ear, villains that all serve a purpose instead of just existing to fill a runtime, practical effects that make everything feel tangible, delivered action sequences that didn't look like a PlayStation 2 cutscene rendered in a blender, and a story that respects decades of Spider-Man history while still having the confidence to carve its own path. Does it have a couple of bumps along the way? Sure, but none of them were big enough to stop me from having an absolute blast from beginning to end. This isn't just another good Spider-Man movie. It is one of the best Spider-Man movies, period. And look, before you sprint for the exits, the second the screen goes black, like your life depends on it, yes, there is a post-credit scene. But before you start expecting portals to open, 12 new Avengers to walk through, and Kevin Feige himself to descend from the ceiling, relax, okay? It is not that kind of a post-credit scene. It is simply a fun little tease of what's to come next. Nothing earth-shattering, nothing that's going to completely rewrite the MCU overnight. Just a nice little stay tuned for what's ahead, provided your bladder hasn't already started negotiating against you. Now, I want to hear from all of you. Have you seen Spider-Man Brand New Day yet? Did you love it? Were you mixed on it? Did it completely exceed your expectations? Let me know down in the comments below, because I always love reading what you have to say, even when you're wrong. I'm kidding, mostly. If you enjoyed hanging out with me today, again, don't forget to leave a like. Subscribe if you haven't already. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a new review. And check out all of the links down in the description for my social media, Patreon, and my podcast, Socially Unwell. There is always something new going on over there, and I'd love to have you join the chaos. I will be back soon with another movie review because, let's be honest here, Hollywood is never going to stop giving me things to overanalyze, and apparently neither am I. Until next time, bye friendships.